Gators Breakdown episode 71 is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. My usual co-host, Joe Vizzi and Bill Sykes, will not be able to join me tonight, so joining me again is Will Miles from SEC Country. You can find Will on Twitter at WillMilesSEC. Will Miles SEC. Will, thanks for joining me again, here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave.
Yeah, we'll do this. We'll do this again. I think you impressed some people last time we were here, and of course, your articles from SEC Country have gotten some people riled up, and we'll hit that later on tonight.
Sounds good.
All right, and for this episode, we have a special guest, a Gators great at the wide receiver position, played at Florida from 1995 to 1997, first team All-SEC, first team All-American selection in 1997. Jacquez Green joins us here on Gators Breakdown. Jacquez, thank you so much for coming on here and talking some Gators football with us.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate you guys having me on.
For sure. I think you've been probably one of the most requested guests we've had here on Gators Breakdown when we announced that we were going to have you on. I think my little personal Twitter exploded a little bit.
That's good. I'm just wondering why you had 71 episodes and I'm just getting on.
I had to get my rapport up a little bit before I started getting some Gator greats, so I didn't want to embarrass myself before that.
That's fine. We're going to make it do what it do tonight, man. We're going to have fun.
Sounds good. So, Jacquez, after Florida, you went on to play in the NFL and since then have joined the high school coaching ranks and getting into some scouting as well. Looks like you're keeping yourself busy in the world of football.
Yeah, keep myself busy. I knew once I got through playing football that I wanted to do something sports related. Right, I've been coaching 9 to 10 years right now, and I do some evaluation and scouting for XOS. Evaluate a lot of young guys, a lot of 9th and 10th graders. So I see a lot of guys way before the guys start talking about it in the recruiting circles. So I enjoy it. I get to stay around the game, so I'm having fun.
And how's the coaching going?
Coaching going good. I was at Lincoln High School the last 6 or 7 years. Went to Valdosta for 1 year. This year, I'll be at Guyby High School. I'm excited about the season. Guyby's won more state championships than any team in our area. So they only won 5 games the last 2 years. So it's a good challenge, and that's what I'm looking for as far as coaching. I always look like a challenge, and to help those kids out on that side of town.
Sounds good. So before we dive into this current Gators team and some more about you and your time at Florida, remember, folks, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites, or get the links by following us on Twitter at Gators Breakdown, and on Facebook, just search Gators Breakdown. Also, please leave a review, like it on iTunes, leave a review, rate on iTunes, all that good stuff there, and help the word of Gators Breakdown. Jacquez, let's start by talking about the current wide receiver core for the Gators. This position has been completely retooled since Jim McElwain become head coach at Florida. Preseason magazines have taken notice and ranked the unit in top 10 in the nation, with Callaway leading the way. But you also got the names of Cleveland, Massey, Powell, Swain, Hammond. What have you seen from these guys where the nation has started to take notice, even with the subpar quarterback play?
On paper, they look good. They're all athletic guys. They all can move, all got good speed. All can make plays in the open field. Something that you need in the SEC. You're going to go against a lot of great defenses. So you need guys that can make plays in space. I think Coach McElwain's done a good job considering, that we have, probably a lack of talent in that area the last couple of years. So I think he's recruited well in that area, and I think those guys are good players. The quarterback, we get good quarterback play this year. I think those guys will have big seasons.
So who do you think has more potential, Antonio Callaway or Tyree Cleveland? And I'm sort of like your thoughts on who you think has more potential both at the college level, and then who do you think will be the better NFL player?
Right now, I only got a small sample size of Tyree Cleveland. He has the size and all, but the thing that Callaway has that you can coach, but you can't really coach, he's a savvy route runner. I think he's a good route runner for a young receiver. I'm not sure what kind of top-end speed he has. It may not make a big of a difference right now, but once you go to the next level, you have to have that type of speed to be able to separate from the more physical and more faster defensive backs. But I think they're a great tandem, though. I think they're probably one of the better tandems we've had at the receiver position in the last couple of years. So hopefully, we get good quarterback play and good offensive line play to help those guys, have a big season for us.
Speaking of Antonio Callaway, Jacquez, we, of course, off the field trouble kind of seems to find its way toward Callaway. What should happen game one against Michigan? Does Jim McElwain need to put his foot down and send a message to Callaway? Is it much ado about nothing since it seems the charges are kind of now a misdemeanor? Kind of what happens in the locker room at this point with a player who seems to find himself in trouble every offseason?
It's tough, as a coach, because a lot of times the coach disciplines players without letting the media know how he actually disciplined the player. I don't think just because the media or some Joe Doe makes a big uproar about discipline a player, you have to do something to make everybody notice it. I think McElwain and a lot of the big time coaches in college football, Urban Meyer, they discipline those guys in their own way that a lot of times the media and other people don't know about.
So, with that in mind, I guess, the area that really seems to need to improve this year is quarterback. And I'm sort of curious as to what you think the most important attribute is for a quarterback. Is it accuracy? Is it arm strength? Is it attitude and leadership? I mean, sort of what do you think is the thing that Gator fans should be looking at and looking for in their quarterback?
I think it's accuracy. I think if a quarterback is accurate, you can move the ball. I think you can have all the leadership in the world. If you can't throw the football, it doesn't matter. So I think accuracy is the main thing. You really don't push the ball down the field, but so many times a game. So most of your passing in college football are going to probably be short to intermediate passes in the majority of the game. So I think if a guy is accurate and has some intelligence and some type of work ethic, I think that'll be good for quarterback position.
And Jacquez, you definitely had the best quarterback with that. We know Danny didn't necessarily have the best arm strength, but you mentioned the accuracy. And for Steve Spurrier's offense, that's exactly what he was looking for, and that's exactly what he got with Danny passing the ball down the field, being accurate and throwing it to spots with you guys.
Yeah, Coach Spurrier's offense, it looked intricate, but it really wasn't that intricate. We just basically, like he always say, we throw the ball with defenders not at. McElwain has come with a more of a West Coast type approach. More passing plays, more concepts, more protection. So nowadays, those quarterbacks have to learn a lot more than what we had to learn at Florida.
Well, and so you obviously had Werfel in '96, but then in '97 it was a battle between Noah Brandeis and Doug Johnson. I'm curious, did that impact the team going into the season? Did it impact the team, the quarterback not getting all the first team reps, or can that fracture a team, or was it just sort of whatever Coach Spurrier said goes?
Actually, back in those days, man, Coach Spurrier was, we was more like almost like clones. We all ran our routes the same. The quarterback took his drop the same. It wasn't really that different. Only difference in those guys were maybe one guy can throw the ball down the field further than another guy. But other than making the reads and knowing the checks and getting out of bad plays, but all those guys knew that. Spurrier was not only the head coach, he was the quarterback coach. So all the quarterbacks knew the offense in and out. And mostly it was between Doug and Jesse, but after a while, neither one, both of them were struggling. So that's when we went to Noah because he had been there the longest, so he knew the offense a lot better.
Jacquez, we mentioned how the wide receivers are getting noticed, even with the lack of quarterback play. And I might be asking you to make a little bit of prediction here, but is this, finally the year McElwain gets the offense going with the quarterback? We know the situation at quarterback now with Zaire coming in and Felipe Franks and maybe Del Rio as well. Does McElwain find his quarterback this season? And I know we kind of talked before we came on air here, but give us a little bit of what you know about Felipe Franks since you were kind of so close to him out that way in Florida.
Felipe has a lot of talent. He played in more of a wing T type offense in high school, and he had a big target, Keith Gavin, outside the. Whenever he get in trouble, he can just throw it up to the big guy. But he has a lot of arm talent. He's a guy that's pretty smart. The thing about nowadays, we're not patient with our quarterbacks. Most of the time you want a guy to come in because he's rated this or that and be able to play right now. But a lot of those guys need red shirts. They need a lot of reps and practice before they become quarterbacks. I think in a perfect world, you probably don't want your guy to start to his junior year. You want him to be able to red shirt, learn the system, sit behind another guy, and then become the quarterback later on in his career.
So as an offensive coordinator yourself, what are you thinking when you're calling plays, particularly maybe with a quarterback who doesn't have experience within the system? I mean, this year Zaire obviously has come in with a couple of months to prepare, and Franks has only been in the system for a year, maybe a little bit more. So what are you doing as an offensive coordinator to make sure that you make him as successful as you can be?
That comes down to the coaching staff. You want to make sure that you have a good game plan going into the game. You got a good feel for what they're going to do based on your formations and based on your protections and stuff like that. And you want to make sure your quarterback has a lot of easy throws, and you want to make sure you call plays that your quarterback runs the best in practice. Some quarterbacks throw certain concepts way better than other concepts. So you want to make sure he has a good you have a good grasp of what he does best, and you also want to give him a good run game so you don't get a lot of third and longs.
Jacquez, what's been your reputation of Jim McElwain so far? I mean, he's won the East his first 2 years, and you can't ask for much there. Maybe not the way some of the Gator fans want it, and the way it looks. Defense has been leading the way, and as we've mentioned about how the offense struggles. But what's been your takeaway from Jim McElwain in his first 2 seasons?
I think he's a good head coach. I don't think he has a lot to do with our offensive struggle. He's an offensive guy, but he's not calling any plays. He's not putting together the offense. But I think he's got a lot out of our team the last couple of years, despite being, ranked real low on offense. Hopefully this year we can get more out the quarterback position, and we have an experienced offensive line. So I think this year you can really probably judge him more than years past because he finally has the talent that he needs to be able to play in the SEC.
Well, and you mentioned that McElwain's not really calling the plays. So, I mean, does that really mean that it falls on Doug Nussmeier this year to make sure that he's calling the plays? And there's been a lot of criticism from myself and others about the predictability of the offense, particularly on 2nd and 10. And I'm curious as to your thoughts about Nussmeier.
You get predictable when you don't feel that you have the type of talent to match up against other teams. I'm sure every 2nd and 10 he's run the ball because he wanted to get it to 3rd and manageable, which makes sense. I've been in that situation before on a high school level because your team's not capable of converting 3rd and long. So I think this year, though, Coach Nuss has, the backs and the line and all the pieces to be more successful than he's been in years in the past. You just, in years past with the lack of talent at different positions, I think he just want to stop the bleeding and not be terrible on offense because your defense is good enough to win the game for you. You just want to turn the ball over and you want to play field position more so.
Jacquez, I think I completely agree with you there. It's just, the first 2 years McElwain's done what he's needed to do to win the East. But year 3, I think, is the year we can finally start seeing, his mold of the program, the players he's brought in. I mean, we got to look at this offense and look at the wide receiver position and the offensive line. Both positions have been completely transformed from when he took over. And, finally getting his pieces there. Now, you can look at the defense, and some people say they may take a step back from, look at the last 2 drafts and how many of those guys are now in the NFL. The defense may need to take a step back, or not need to, but, may have to take a step back. Is this the year where McElwain has to show more on offense?
I think he does. And also on defensively, if they do take a step back, they go from in the top 10 to 20-something. That's still a solid defense in college football.
Yep.
Which I think we can be, regardless, because we had a lot of young guys that played a lot of snaps last year. But I think we've been in the probably in the 80s and on offense. If we can at least get up to the 40s or 30s, that'll be a lot better for us, as a whole team this year.
So, in terms of the offense and where fans are really looking, I think a lot of people are putting hope in Justin Fields coming in potentially as a recruit. And I'm curious as to the impact that somebody like that might have on a recruiting class. I know Bill Sykes, who co-hosts this most of the time, he's talked about Justin Fields being a transformational player, that he's not just somebody who comes into your program, he's also somebody who can bring other recruits with him. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
I don't put much clout into recruits unless they show me on the field they can play. Because I've seen too many times where these guys come in who's supposed to be this and that, and next thing you know, they transferring out to another school a year later. So, he can bring in more talent once he signs. But if we have a good season on offense, guys going to want to line up to come play next year on offense for us. So I think your product on the field was attract players more so than a particular player.
Jacquez, I'm glad you said that because I think that's how McElwain wants to recruit. I think he wants to be a little bit like Spurrier into, all right, let me show you something on the field, and that's what's going to pull recruits in. We haven't seen that in the first 2 years, and I think that's probably why recruiting has not been what Florida fans have known to be, especially under Urban Meyer and Will Muschamp. Those classes were ranked high, but didn't necessarily equate to winning. But I think McElwain's kind of in that mold of Spurrier, where he wants to be able to point to, hey, look, I can put you in this system, and we can have success. So that's where I think this year 3 definitely comes and starts playing into that role. He's going to have to start showing more offense to recruit the way he wants to recruit.
Yes, I think so, because with Spurrier offense, guys were knocking down the door to play there at one time. And at one time, they thought we were so good they couldn't play there. So we see for a couple of years at one time. But McElwain, I think he's a good coach. I think he did a good job the first 2 years, regardless of what type of talent we had on offense. I don't think any other coach would have got us to 2 SEC championships, the first 2 seasons in the league in the SEC, regardless of whether the East is down or the West is down, because like right now they saying the East was down. When I played, the West was terrible. So it just goes in cycles all the time. It goes in cycles.
So with that in mind, what do you think that Florida fans should be looking for from the team in the opener against Michigan? Is there something you can point to that you think they should be looking for to see that improvement, to see that step forward? I mean, it's simple to say quarterback play, but is there something schematically you think maybe that they can be looking for?
Not even quarterback play. I think up front, offensive line, a lot of guys returning. If you win the line of scrimmage against Michigan, you should win the game. Michigan's replacing a ton of seniors. It doesn't mean anything because Coach Harbaugh has recruited well the last couple of years. So he has some young guys that's dying to get into the game and dying to play. But I think if we can win the game up front, that'll go a long ways to win the total ball game.
Jacquez, we had a big Twitter conversation over the weekend, and I'm a big believer in the stars matter and recruiting is a lifeblood of a program. It doesn't guarantee winning, but it is a prerequisite of winning championships. The teams that win championships are usually high in the recruiting rankings. And many have questioned, McElwain's recruiting, as I mentioned. But, in what you've seen, I know your time at Spurrier was different than what it is now, and you're around high schoolers now and scouting and coaching in high school. Is it, when you get to the college level, is it the X's and O's or the Jimmies and Joes, as some people say?
It's a combination. You got to have good players to be able to execute. But also, I don't think the college guys have been developing the talent like a lot. Some teams develop talent, some teams don't. If you got to go out and get 2 or 3 receivers every year and your senior receivers got to transfer out every year, that means you're not been developing talent at that position. Back in our day, when the guy's a junior, he usually be ready to play. He's ready to contribute to your program. Nowadays, when the guy's junior, he's transferring out the program, which means you haven't developed talent all the time. And you starting every year with freshmen and sophomores. I think the coaching aspect, I don't think they coach as much as they did back in the day. I think they want guys who are already ready to play and just want to go with X and O's. But I think if the coaches got back to developing talent and developing guys and, I think that'll go a long ways and, having your roster stacked with a lot of talent.
Well, so, does part of that have to do with special teams? I know you spent quite a bit of time, especially your freshman and sophomore year, returning kicks. And I'm curious as to, one of the things Urban Meyer did was he put all his best players on special teams and really sort of tried to gain an edge there. And so, there's a balance, I guess, between developing guys and putting your best guys on special teams.
I guess it was good with Urban because he recruited such, highly ranked classes that if you got 4 and 5 stars on special teams, your special teams going to be good. They're going to be fast. They're going to be physical. They're going to be able to run. But you just got to develop your talent. There's no way in the world that you should have guys transferring out every year when you should be developing that guy that he should be able to contribute at least by his junior year. That happens so much in our receiving core, not even with Coach McElwain, but with Coach Muschamp. We have receivers transferring out every year when they should be ready to contribute at least by their junior season.
Just a few more minutes here with Jacquez Green on Gators Breakdown. We'll get a little personal here with Jacquez and going back to his time and some questions some listeners out there sent our way. So, Jacquez, let's discuss your own recruitment a little bit. You played high school football in the state of Georgia. Was your recruitment a crazy roller coaster, or was Florida the place you knew you wanted to go? And what did Steve Spurrier have to tell you to become a Gator?
It was different back then. Back then it was what you put on film. you what you put on film, you come into, you take your 5 visits, then you choose a school. It was not all the websites. It was not all the 4 stars and 5 stars. You know, back then it was more of a guy, he's more of a regional recruit, or he was a nationwide recruit. I guess a nationwide recruit nowadays would be like a 5-star. And no, I just took my visits, and I just enjoyed I wasn't sure how good I was. So I knew if I went to Florida, I can play without being the starting wide receiver, because I knew we played 3 and 4 wide receivers a lot. And Alabama was my other school I really, considered. And at Alabama, there's a run-oriented team, and I knew if you wasn't the first 2 receivers on their roster, you probably wouldn't play a lot, because they play a lot with the fullback and the tight end. And so that's how Florida became my school. It was a chance to play without having to start. I was a scrub back then.
So did growing up in Georgia shield you from the UF-FSU rivalry, or was it clear that was the game every year that, did you grow to hate them as much as we do? I guess coming in, or
actually, I grew up watching the Vince Dooley show. I watched it every Sunday morning. I think it was Sunday morning. I watched the Vince Dooley show every year. I knew all the Georgia Bulldog players. I went to Georgia games a lot. I went to a couple of UF games, but Georgia wanted me to play cornerback. I did not want to play defense. Auburn wanted me to play corner also. I talked to a guy who recruited me from Auburn all day, which was Coach Kelly at FSU, matter of fact. We talked about that, and he was like, no, we got to make him play offense. But I didn't want to play defense, and so Auburn and Georgia were schools I knew about, but I never took a visit to either one because they wanted me to play defense.
Jacquez, how does it feel having Steve Spurrier back in Gainesville as an ambassador to Florida?
It's good, It's always great when you got a big time coach who's been there, done that. Guy Coach McElwain can go down the hall and talk to about issues or what's going on with the program. And it's also good for the fans and stuff, because a lot of the fans, regardless of who come in as a head coach, they're gonna always love Coach Spurrier. Even sometimes we get into it with the fans because they try to tell us we Spurrier guys. I'm like, I'm not a Spurrier guy. I like UF, but I respect my coach, and I love my time there, and I love when he coached me.
So you really experienced, I guess, some highs and some lows your time there in Gainesville. I mean, you had the Fiesta Bowl in '95, and then you had the Sugar Bowl in '96. And I'm just sort of curious as to that whole experience and what maybe did you learn in '95 that helped you in '96.
95 was cool. It was the fact that we ran the table. We got a chance to play Nebraska in the championship. We watched them on film. We thought we was going to destroy them. and it was turned around. It was a total opposite. But, after that time, the way they was blitzing us and stuff, we Coach Spurrier figured out that if we get in the shotgun, we'll have more time to get the ball off. And, after that game, we realized, we was on the bus on our way to the airport, and we realized that we had so many guys back on the team for the next season. So we knew we'd have a chance next year.
And that leads me to one of my first viewer questions, Jacquez, from Dan at Gator Bulldog ATC. Is that how does Spurrier motivate you guys after the '95 title loss? Was it more from Spurrier, or was it more from the team leaders?
We had good team leaders, man. Lawrence Wright, Shea Showers, Danny. We just had good leaders. Lawrence Wright was the main leader, man. He set the tone in wind sprints. He set the tone in practice. I don't know how he always had energy. I was like, dude, do you ever sleep or relax? Like, he always had energy. He was always talking. But that leadership came from within. And I've never seen that type of leadership from within on any team I've coached or any other team I've ever been on. It was amazing how he can just inspire everybody, how he can always lead by example. It was just amazing. I don't know how he was wired. Lawrence Wright was wired different from anybody I've ever met.
And going back to that, you dislocated your hip in '95 in the national title game against Nebraska. Talk about the rehab and coming back from that, and did you have to use that as motivation for '96 as well?
Not really. When I dislocated my hip, I was more worried about being able to walk again. At that time, I've heard that most dislocated hips come in like car accidents and stuff like that. It's rare to come like in a sport, and I was expected not to be back until we started practice in the summertime, and I was back before the end of spring. But I spent the whole off season in underwater. What it was I was running on the water every day for like 4 or 5 months in a row, nonstop. So, so I wouldn't have any weight bearing on my hip. And next thing you know, I started playing basketball. The team didn't know it, but I was playing basketball at the rec center and stuff. And I didn't have any much lateral movement, but I can run straight ahead pretty fast, and I can backpedal it pretty fast. So once I got better from playing basketball, and then I started trying out on the field, and then the training staff started I can run forward pretty fast, and I got back out there, and I actually came back before the end of spring practice and played in the spring game.
Yeah, that's good. Going back, that's, our golden time for you and following you as a Gator. And, those 95, 96 years, and I tell you what, and of course, going to the FSU game in 97, definitely sticks out. So it's good to reminisce with that time. For right now, how are the former Gator players with McElwain as head coach? How are they? Are y'all guys included in the program? Is it more than what it used to be, or is it about the same? Kind of describe the transition of what it's like being a Gator and then having to come back to campus and be involved with the program in today's.
We pretty much included. No, I know I'm included. I know a lot of other guys can come by and include. A lot of guys got other things going on in their lives right now. But I'm included. It started back when Urban Meyer took over. Urban started trying to include all of this within the program. Muschamp, followed suit, did the same thing, and Coach McElwain. But a lot of guys so many guys off my team that I played back with and coaching high school football or coaching pro football or training guys that we really don't have time to come back to the school. But a lot of guys, we watch it every Saturday, and, some of us on the group text, so we group text each other and talk about what's going on with the program.
Yeah, I know you're a fun follower on Twitter during football season. So I think we all are. So we'll have to go back and forth a little bit when this season comes up. Will, got a couple more questions for Jacquez. Did you want to get anything in before I hit these last couple questions?
Yeah, I'm just sort of curious as to that feeling when you finally won the title in '96 in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, what's that experience like? And you mentioned that that's one of those teams that had all those leaders. I mean, and you still got a group text going on. I'm just sort of curious as to your feelings now. 20 years later. What's that feeling like?
It was. I'm telling you when I got the feeling when Terry Jackson broke the long touchdown at the end of the game. And it kind of felt like a downer because it was like the journey was so good. And when he scored, it was like basically it's over. It's over. Now we won and it's over. And people would not realize how that feels to be on a journey and going for a goal and you trying to win a national championship and you realize you finally won it. So when Terry scored that touchdown with dancing in the end zone, you can see in old highlights when everybody just dancing on the sideline because it's like, okay, we finally won a national championship. And, it's something we had been fighting for the 3 or 4 years I've been there. Because I think my first year I got there and we redshirt, I think we preseason like number 2 or number 3. So we had been fighting for that goal for like 4 years now. And we had finally won a national championship. And also that night, it was a lot of ex-Gators on the sideline with us. And so they were excited for us. I know Chris Doran was there. I think Aubrey was there. There was a lot of old Gators on the sideline with us that night. So they was excited, more excited than we were.
That reminds me of another question I want to ask personally before I get back to our listener questions. Did Spurrier's demeanor change after getting beat by FSU and then finding out that you guys were going to play again in the Sugar Bowl? Was there anything different about Spurrier from that game up until, the rematch?
Not really, man. Coach Spurrier's demeanor is the same like each game. We can be down 50-0 or we can be up 50-0, and he always said the same thing. We're gonna keep throwing it. We're gonna keep throwing it at him. We're gonna keep throwing it at him. That was his demeanor no matter what the score was. And Spurrier coming in the locker room, only thing he's gonna do is get on the board and he's gonna draw up some more pass plays to be able to score some touchdowns in the second half. So his demeanor never changed. And that's the thing we liked about Spurrier. Spurrier thought like we thought as players. I guess that's because he was an ex-player. He wanted to score points. He wanted to humiliate you if he could because he thought it was your defense should stop us. If not, we're going to keep scoring. And that's how we thought as players also.
Okay. This comes from Amazing Will on Twitter. Who was the best defensive back you played in college?
Wow. I played a lot of great defensive backs in college. I played Corey Chavis from Vanderbilt. I think he went like second round. He was a big guy. He was about 6 feet, about 210. So he was tough because he get his hands on you. He can reroute you, whatever. I played Terry Fair, who went first round. He was a quick guy. He can mirror you all over the field because he's real quick. Played Samari Rowe, who went second round. He was a good defensive back. I played Patrick Surtain, who went second round, who went to the Dolphins. So I played against 4 or 5 defensive backs who went first and second round my last year. So all those guys were good players. You know, they did it in their own way. Some of them did it with quickness. Some of them did it with Corey Chavis did it with more strength and power. But all 4 or 5 of those guys were good defensive backs.
I meant to shout out Biggie Smalls, Cruzon Base, who sent me the question about how former players are treated in Gators and for the Gators right now. Let me see. Of course, ask you Brandon Eisenman, favorite memorable play as a Gator. I probably can pick that one out. But I guess I'll let you answer and see if I'm right here.
That was like the favorite play of a lot of people. You know, the last catch, what, 96? Right. 96, 97.
97 FSU.
97 FSU game. But you know what I took more pride in was the fact that national championship game, I caught like 5 passes on third down. Like that's doesn't mean as much to the average fan, but to me that was big to me because we had a play for me to run like a 10-yard in route backside against FSU that we knew would be open most of the game. And I think me and Danny hit it like 6 times. I had like 7 catches. I think like 5 of them for first downs that game. So that was big for me. You know, the fact that Coach Spurrier trusted me that much in the national title game to have a play where if I'm one-on-one, he was going to me.
Sounds good. Will, you got anything else for Jacquez before we get him off here?
Yeah, so all of Florida's championship teams have lost 1 game. And I'm wondering, are you guys like the 72 Dolphins? Do you secretly hope no Gator team goes undefeated?
No, I don't really care, no, man. I just like for us to have success. You know, I like for the team to play well, represent the university well, all the good stuff that everybody like to say. But I don't care, man. I just hope those kids play, you know, represent the university. That's it. I've played. I won a national title. I won an SEC title. I've been an All-American. I did everything you can do in college. So whatever else they do, they can only do the same thing I've already done.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Jacquez, man, thank you so much for joining us here on Gators Breakdown. I know our listeners look forward to it, and we'll get it out there. But I can't thank you enough for joining us here and sharing your memories and sharing your thoughts on this current Gators program.
Appreciate you guys for having me on.
All right, thanks, man. All right, Will. Yeah, you kind of set the Twitter world on fire today, and Gator Nation world on fire today. With your article today, I'll read the headline, and then I'll just kind of let you kind of explain it, and we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit. The case for giving quarterback Luke Del Rio another chance in 2017.
Yeah, so the headline doesn't have the amount of nuance that that was in the article. I hope, at least. Really what I did was I was originally trying to ask the question of who's the better fit. Is it Justin Fields or is it recent USC decommit Matt Corral? And so I was looking at it saying, okay, well, who's the best? Who's the best? How do we look at that? And in the past, I've looked at completion percentage, and that's really a way of measuring how good a player is going to be in college, that as their completion percentage goes up, the quality of the offense goes up considerably in college. It's a pretty distinct correlation there. So the only place you can go is in high school. And so I started looking at high school stats, and it's amazing how closely completion percentage correlates between high school and college. And so you can start predicting, is someone going to play well or someone not going to play well, or at least what level will they play at when they get into college. So, elite passers in college complete almost 67% of their passes. And so you really need somebody in high school who's 3, 4, 5 percentage points around there, because what ends up happening is that you end up with an average of somewhere between 3 or 4% is usually the difference between their high school and their college completion percentages. And it doesn't always go down when they go to college too. Sometimes it goes up. It's about a 4% difference. Yeah,
so I think you pointed out Luke Del Rio's completion percentage is at 70.1 out of 255 attempts. And then I think you pointed out the most telling stat to me is the 8.9 yards per attempt. And that's my big knock on Luke Del Rio. Even when he did look good early in the season against UMass, Kentucky. Kentucky was his best game, by far. And North Texas before he got hurt, it seemed to be a lot of dink and dunks, and a lot of people still questioning the arm strength at that point, even when he was healthy. And then, of course, he got hurt. The arm strength became even more of an issue. What did you see from Luke Del Rio to see maybe, maybe the injury played more of a part into why he didn't get the job done? Because Gator Nation, they got tired of what they saw and after the injury. It was the Georgia game. Yes, they won. Didn't look so good. And yes, they were living dangerously. They go to Arkansas the next week. And with the way the offense was playing at the time, they were living dangerously. And when you have an offense that we've seen the first 2 years with Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier, you can't rely on the defense to bail you out every time. When you have an offense like that, you're living dangerously. If the defense does have a bad game, then those type of games happen when you go to Arkansas. And that was the last we saw, of Luke Del Rio. But if there is a case to be made, what are the positives that we can take away from Luke Del Rio to maybe he's more of a threat in this competition with Malik Zaire and Felipe Franks?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is that, his completion percentage from high school to college, the difference was 14.4%. And no one else was above 7.8. And the vast majority of people, I've now looked at like 24 or 25, just because I wanted a larger sample, basically everybody is within 3 or 4%. So, it's hard to complete even 70% of passes against air. So he's not as inaccurate as he showed. And I think that shows up in the stats. So if you look at UMass, Kentucky, and North Texas, he completed 61.4% of his passes. His quarterback rating was 140.4. If you look at Missouri, Georgia, and Arkansas, he completed 52% of his passes, and his quarterback rating was 96.7. So there's a clear demarcation. And the reality is that, yes, the talent at the beginning of the season, or the opposition at the beginning of the season, was less talented, but it wasn't appreciably so. Missouri, Georgia, and Arkansas didn't have fantastic years. So I think it's actually a pretty decent comparison. And I think you can really, there were times against Missouri where he was just chucking the ball up there. Now, my biggest problem with him in those cases was that his pre-snap read indicated you shouldn't be throwing deep to Callaway, and he kept throwing deep to Callaway. And so, whether he was pressing, whether he was injured, whether he was just a little bit skittish and he was getting that ball out regardless, that he wasn't going to hold it for that extra half beat, I don't necessarily know. But, I'm somebody who's had a knee reconstruction surgery. I mentioned it in the article. And, that was just playing basketball. And every time I go out there to cut, I have a second thought. And so, somebody who's, a month off of a pretty severe knee strain, I can see how they might be a little bit skittish when the bullets start flying.
Do you think Del Rio is more of a threat in this quarterback competition when fall camp rolls around? It is kind of a unforeseen or a conclusion Gator fans have come to, that it's Zaire and Frank's show when fall camp rolls around. But is Del Rio more of a threat, you think? And is this a three-headed battle? Is it and the one thing I don't like about it is you're going into fall camp and you're having receivers having to get used to 3 quarterbacks instead of just 2 or just 1. That would be the ideal situation. But do you think it's a 3-man competition when fall camp rolls around?
I really hope so, because I look at the completion percentages in high school of Malik Zaire. He was 56.6%, and then you look at it at Notre Dame, and he was at 58%, somewhere in that range. So really, you look at it, and in college he has been exactly who he was in high school from a completion percentage standpoint. And the reality is, guys who complete passes at 58% in college win 6, 7, 8 games. They don't win 10, 11, and 12. They just don't. You can see a clear demarcation in the performance of offenses. And so, a couple weeks ago, I was on here and I said that if he gets a 6th year of eligibility, I think that's a really big deal. I think I was wrong. I went back and I looked at the statistical and the statistics here, and I think there's a reason Deshaun Kaiser beat him out at Notre Dame. And that worries me about Zaire, particularly because you don't imagine he comes to Florida and waits for the SEC to change the rule about transfers and all those sorts of things, unless he's basically been given the starting position, or at least given the pole position in that competition. But I mean, you look at Zaire, Franks, Del Rio, and even Kadarius Toney, and you look at their completion percentages in high school. Del Rio and Tony are up over 70%. And Tony actually has a better yards per attempt. I mean, that was something you mentioned about Del Rio, sort of dumping the ball off. Tony has a pretty decent yards per attempt. I mean, you look at the film, he does actually come off of his first receiver and go to his second read. I mean, is he ready right now to be a starting quarterback in the pocket? No, maybe not. But at the same time, the guy can run around like crazy. I mean, there have been gifs going around the internet showing him just faking people out of their shorts in the indoor practice facility. And if you can dance around back there long enough, you can get guys open that way too. But that also then goes back to Nussmeier, which he doesn't seem to really encourage running quarterbacks. And so, that also seems to, or plays into it for me. So if you look at Zaire and he's not completing a high percentage of his passes, you got to use him in run pass option. You got to use him in, some spread concepts where he's a risk to run. And, thus far, that hasn't been something that Nussmeier has shown at any of his stops. He didn't show it with Treon Harris. He didn't show it with Devin Gardner at Michigan. I look at it and go, is Zaire really a good fit with the offensive coordinator and what he wants to do? I hope they give Del Rio a shot. I think the reality is everybody was really excited for him to come back against Missouri and Georgia last year based on what they saw against UMass, Kentucky, and North Texas. And so to say that a guy with a knee that was probably 75, 80% best is, that we're going to judge him off of those 3 games. I mean, I get it. I didn't like watching it either. but I do think there's a little bit of recency bias because that Arkansas game was a complete debacle. But let's not pretend that, the entire team didn't show up. I mean, Del Rio obviously was part of the problem, but the defense got steamrolled pretty good in that first half too. And, so I don't think Del Rio was the problem. I think he's sort of I think he was the problem, but I don't think he was the only problem, right? I mean, he was part of a whole that in that game just didn't show up. They won the Georgia game, they won the Missouri game. The guy won. He was 5-1 as a starter. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned Doug Nussmeier. That was a shot at your column last week. I believe it was last week, where Doug Nussmeier not being able to necessarily adapt to quarterbacks that you mentioned, Devin Gardner, Treon Harris. But if you looked at Florida recruiting and kind of see where they were going at the quarterback position with Justin Fields, Emory Jones, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and the guys that they were offering, Joe Milton as well. You kind of saw this maybe a shift in philosophical thinking of Doug Nussmeier, Jim McElwain, where they get some quarterbacks that maybe are still known for their arm first, but can be mobile quarterbacks as well. And so Malik Zaire fits that mold. But I agree with you. Doug Nussmeier hasn't shown yet the ability to cater to those type of players, to those type of quarterbacks who, can be run threats. And we saw it a little bit with Will Grier, not much. But with Treon Harris, I thought you would see it a bit more. And the only thing maybe I can think of that dispels that is there was nothing behind Treon Harris in his time here. But I've been one of those. I've always had the mindset you can't coach scared. And if you think you can win a game because you need to run your quarterback, well, you run your quarterback. If that's what makes your offense run, you take your chances. And a lot of quarterbacks when they run, it's kind of they don't get injured when they run around a lot. A lot of guys stand in the pocket and get hurt more than they would if they ever just made something happen and were able to get out of bounds, not get hit, and use their feet a little bit more. So I do think, going back to the first season, Jim McElwain, Doug Nussmeier could have called more run-style plays for Treon Harris to help him out. But is it with the way we saw recruiting going with those quarterbacks I mentioned and making Malik Zaire a focus, is this maybe something behind the scenes where Doug Nussmeier and Jim McElwain say they really have no choice to change the offense into a run threat from the quarterback position?
Boy, I hope so. Because, you look at Nussmeier and his performances at stops as offensive coordinator at Fresno State, Washington, and Alabama were all very good. It's not until the recent history when you look at Michigan. So Michigan, the year before he got there, was 47th in points per game and dropped to 111th after he got there. And Florida, they were 56th, and then they've averaged 103rd since he came. And I think some of that is due to talent. But, you can't tell me that the guys on the team for Florida aren't capable of putting up 45 points against North Texas. I mean, that's just the reality. So we can say, oh, they don't have the talent, and that's why they're getting stomped by Florida State and Alabama. But the reality is those guys are better than the guys who are for North Texas. So, I don't necessarily buy the talent argument all that much. In that capacity, I think when you look at the actual numbers, though, what you look at is that Devin Gardner averaged considerably less rushing yards the year Nussmeier was there than he did the year prior. And Treon Harris had less rushing yards under Nussmeier than he did the year prior under Kurt Roper. And so, you start looking at that and saying, is he protecting the quarterback? Is he trying to make him a pocket passer? And when you look at Alabama, they brought in Lane Kiffin to be a little bit more multiple than they were under McElwain and Nussmeier. And so more run-pass option, embracing somebody like Jalen Hurts, who I'm not sure would have played there 5 or 6 years ago, or at least wouldn't have been the starting quarterback and definitely not as a true freshman. And so, the point of the article, and I think really what I believe, is that Nussmeier has to change a little bit, that, he's got to be able to risk the quarterback. I mean, one of the things that would really make me happy is if they put Zaire and Tony in the backfield. They've got sort of that diamond set back there. You put Scarlett back there with Tony and Zaire, and maybe even then flank out a wide receiver who's back in that formation to start with. What linebacker is going to be able to cover that? And, in terms of the ability to run out of that formation or pass out of that formation. But that, that obviously requires the quarterback who can hit the, 8 to 10 yard pass. And that, we'll see whether that can happen. But, again, the guy becomes more open the more you're willing to run that quarterback. I think you make those windows a little bit wider and can maybe take advantage of the fact that, maybe your quarterback doesn't have the accuracy of Peyton Manning back there.
It's definitely time to start getting creative on offense. If you have the troubles that we've seen the last couple of years, it's time to start getting creative. It's time to start out scheming, and it's tough when you can't block up front. We know, the run game needs to be opened as well. Maybe that's another reason you bring Zaire in. It's another option. You bring in more read option to help, Scarlett with some running lanes and hold the linebackers at bay. Maybe that frees some of the intermediate routes up as well. So it's all things that can happen. But as you mentioned, and as we mentioned, Doug Nussmeier and Jim McElwain have to change from what we've seen the last couple of years, and how much they're willing to change how much they're willing to run the quarterbacks that they have on the roster. So it's going to be fall camp, not too much longer away, and of course, for however many seasons in a row since Tim Tebow has been gone, quarterbacks at the forefront of Florida, and more questions than answers still. But hopefully this time around, and we'll know game one how it shakes out against Michigan.
Yeah, well, Jacquez actually specifically called out what I'm sort of looking for here, which is, he said you got to know what your quarterback does best, and then you got to let him do it, and you got to call the game to be that way. And if you look at the last 3 games of the year last year, Iowa, I can't remember. I wrote something about it, but it was basically the second half opened with a wide receiver screen that went for about a yard or two, a run that went for a yard or minus 1 yard, and then a little pass across the middle to Brandon Powell. And one time there was a pass interference, one time the ball was dropped. But you looked at that and go, geez, I don't know much. I don't know anything about football compared to these guys who are head coaches. Clearly, the defensive coordinator for Alabama should know what's coming if they're going to run this 3 straight games. And so, I completely agree that you need to find what your quarterback does. But if your quarterback can only run those 3 plays, what was going on in fall camp? There has to be more than that you can run. Now, part of that is, can your defense or can your offensive line block? Part of that is, again, not wanting to turn the ball over because you have such a good defense. But, I don't expect the defense to take a huge step back, but I do expect them to take a step back. They've been top 10 for 4 or 5 years. I think you can expect them to be in the 30s, 35, which means the offense can't be 100 again. And so, really it's going to be a question of how do you get there. And hopefully what we'll see is, to me, the key to look for in that Michigan game is, are they running some spread? Are they running Zaire, especially if Zaire's the starter, but even Franks? You got to put that thought into the defensive end so he can't just pin his ears back. And, Florida faced a lot of 8-man fronts last year,
Mm-hmm.
particularly on the road. If you look at the road, the offensive line was very slow getting off the ball on pass plays. Particularly the Tennessee game comes to mind, where Barnett was just wreaking havoc, and so he was busting around the end and hitting the quarterback on third down. So I understand why you're not necessarily going to call a bunch of drop back passes, but they were doing that with four rushers. And then they had 8 in the box, and they were just stuffing the run. And in fact, I think they even had 9 a couple of times. So, it's not just one thing. I don't think that it's just the quarterback, but I do think that when it comes to predictability on offense, like it's one thing to do what your quarterback does well. It's another thing to be so predictable that there's a pattern coming out of the half for 3 straight games. And so, that's the kind of, I'd be looking for running plays coming straight out of the chute, and the quarterback runs in particular. And then I'd be looking for some more unpredictability, maybe a reverse, something where you roll the quarterback out to one side and then throw a screen back to the other side. The kinds of passes that can get them comfortable and are safe, but also have some misdirection involved.
Yeah, I mean, and look at when we see the best creativity from this Florida offense. Go back and look at first drives of certain games last year. Basically the whole first quarter against Tennessee. Then you go to the first drive against FSU, the first drive against Alabama, and go back even to the Alabama game. As bad as it was, Austin Appleby looked very good at times and very bad at times. And he for as far as yardage goes, he put up probably, I think, one of the top, 3 or 4 yardage totals on Alabama's defense, passing the ball. And a lot of that was, that first drive where they marched right down the field, and most of those were passing plays. It's so weird how Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier can start these games off so hot, make it look so creative. You can tell they spent their time with it, but then by the time the second quarter rolls around, second half, as you said, it gets very predictable.
Yeah, and I think there's a pattern, and it's not just with the quarterbacks. There's a pattern of little mistakes that kill drives.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I got really excited about during the spring game was there was a play where the safety came on a blitz, and Scarlett picked it up. And not only did he pick up the blitz, he also re-engaged after he picked up the blitz. So he picked it up twice. And so to see him not get bulldozed and to see him go to the right spot for the blitz was important. There were there was real consternation, I think, in Gator Nation about Scarlett not playing more often early in the season last year, and McElwain and Nussmeier were rotating in their backs, 3 guys at a time, and P. Ryan was getting quite a bit of play, and so was Mark Thompson. And the question was, well, why aren't they running Scarlett? He's clearly the best player as a running back there. And the reason they weren't playing him is because they couldn't trust him to pick up the pass protection. There were a couple of plays against Tennessee against Kentucky where he laid the defensive end. There's a play against LSU where he just wasn't in the right spot, and Appleby got nailed and pushed him out of field goal range. Those little mistakes as the players get another year under their belt, I think are going to go away. There's a play in the Missouri game where they had 2 offensive linemen for 1 linebacker against Missouri and a screen pass set up that should have gone for a touchdown. And both offensive linemen whiffed. And the guy got taken, and the running back got taken down. And that just can't happen. The design was perfect. And so, I'll be the first to criticize Nussmeier when he's predictable. But this was a perfect play call set up against the perfect defense. The players were in a perfect position to take advantage of it, and the offensive lineman whiffed. And the running back gets tackled, and it's a 2-yard gain, and everybody goes, "Oh, Del Rio, he can't complete a pass longer than 2 yards." It's like that should have been a 45-yard touchdown. And so,
and we've seen that a lot.
Yeah, and so the question then becomes, if those small little mistakes keep adding up, is that a coaching problem, right? Mm-hmm. That that Saban yanks somebody off the field when they make one of those. So you see somebody making 3 of them, and there's a talent gap, but between Florida and Alabama. But is it really significant enough that you can't hold somebody accountable and pull them off the field?
Yeah, and that's one reason I've defended Nussmeier up to a point as well, because there have been plenty of times when there are plays there to be made. And with this offense, I hate to say has to be perfect, but when the plays are there, they need to be made, because there's not a lot of them that are there because of the deficiencies on the offensive line, quarterback play, running game not being able to get anything going because the offensive line can't block. So there were times in the FSU game where Antonio Callaway was wide open on a corner route and Appleby just overthrows, and other times where I believe Antonio Callaway in the Vanderbilt game was wide open on like the the 2 or 3 yard line, and Appleby just does it to another receiver in the end zone and completely throws it out of the back of the end zone. So if there are plays where the design is there and the quarterback just doesn't see it, as you mentioned, missed blocks. So it is very interesting to see how much this offense changes, how much they're going to work on this stuff with whoever the quarterback is, whether it's more read option, just more experience, just in general, being able to make this offense click, along with, McElwain's recruited some pretty good players at the wide receiver position and the running back position, and where they're getting praise in preseason magazines and the like. So, Will, thanks for joining me again. Anything else you want to hit before we sign off on this episode?
Yeah, I just hope that one of the plays in the playbook this year is to chuck it up to Tyree Cleveland when he's got one-on-one coverage. I mean, the guy's tall. You know the double's going to go over to Callaway. Just throw the back shoulder fade and let the guy go get it. We haven't seen that much at all. And, that to me should be a staple of whoever's the quarterback. So, along with the quarterback running the ball and some spread concepts, hopefully we'll see a couple of back shoulder fades to Cleveland. And if Cleveland can make a couple of plays in that direction, then the coverage has to come away from Callaway, and you can really make some things happen.
For real. And for sure. And, we think we know there's enough talent on this receiver core, as we mentioned with Jacquez Green, and he broke it down as well. And as I mentioned, preseason magazines are taking notice of this wide receiver core, led by Antonio Callaway, Tyree Cleveland. So if you can get that type of play where defenses have to worry about both and get a quarterback that can get it to them, maybe this offense can take off. So it's been episode 71 of Gators Breakdown. We had Jacquez Green on earlier, breaking down the Gators and talking about his time at Florida. And we've even discussed Will Miles' latest articles that you can find on SEC Country. You can find Will on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. And Will and I are going to work on some stuff during the season. So kind of stay tuned for that announcement and then what we're going to do for Gators Breakdown when the season gets rolling here. So lots to look forward to. So for Will, I'm Dave. This has been Gators Breakdown.